everyone, my name is Sarah Vargo. I am the Children's Services Manager for the Willoughby-Eastlake Public Library System, and today we're here to celebrate Arts Fest. So for my video for Arts Fest, I am going to read you some picture book biographies about artists. So this is going to be a story time that is a little bit different. It's probably for a little bit older kids that have a little bit of a longer attention span. It's not going to be music and all that fun, crazy stuff. It's more to help us learn about some famous artists through some really beautiful picture books. So what I'm going to do today is read you a book, and then we're going to use my green screen to show you some of the artist's work, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So this video might be a little bit long, so you can always watch it in parts. It's going to be available all weekend, and also it'll be available on the library's YouTube page afterwards, so you can always come back and view it later. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to start with Mary Blair. And Mary Blair isn't necessarily what you would think of when you're thinking of a fine artiste. You would probably start thinking about Michelangelo or Monet or something like that. But I love Mary Blair and I love this book. So I think that it's a really cool introduction to what is art and what we think of when we think of art. So Mary Blair's Unique Flair by Amy Novelski and illustrated by Brittany Lee. And the illustrations in this book are just beautiful, and they're very inspired by Mary Blair's work. So, Mary Blair's Unique Flair. Mary Brown Robinson loved color. Even her name had a color in it. All she wanted to do was paint, but her family didn't have the money for such things. Still, sometimes they went with less to eat so that Mary could buy paper and jars of color. So this already might be reminding you of some famous Disney movies or Disney rides. Mary was born into an artistic home. Her mother sewed clothing for a living. Her father had the most beautiful handwriting, and he was a dreamer. He dreamed of traveling. Mary was a dreamer too. She dreamed of being an artist. When the family moved from Texas to California, Mary carried her sketchbook and her suitcase full of paints all the way to the Golden State. She loved to travel, just like her father. At school, Mary covered her textbooks with drawings. She entered contests and earned a spot in the School for the Arts. She later married another artist named Lee and became Mary Blair. They vowed to make art, but it's hard to make a living as an artist. So, Mary took a job with the Walt Disney Studios, and there she painted a dog named Lady and the big emotions and ears of a little elephant named Dumbo alongside other artists. Despite how fun it was to work at Disney, it wasn't Mary's dream come true yet, so she quit. She preferred to stay home and paint. But when Mary heard that Walt was taking artists, including Lee, on a trip to South America, she asked Mr. Disney to take her along. Mary grabbed her suitcase full of paints and she flew from Burbank to Brazil, to Argentina, Bolivia, Ecuador, and Peru. Mary had never seen such bright and happy colors before. Verde and azul, amarillo, Laraguanda, anaranjado, vermilio, rojo, and rosa, lilias, lavanda, rojo, morado, maroon, cinza, gris, picho, and negro. Yeah, my Spanish is great. And her favorite color, blanco, the color of a blank piece of paper, of possibility. She immersed herself in the colors and the cultures that she painted, and she painted them all. She especially loved painting the children she met. It was a small world after all. Hopefully those guys might look a little familiar to you. Then, with her suitcase full, Mary went back to work for Walt, and this time it was a dream come true. She painted and painted. She painted colors you weren't supposed to paint together. Golden yellow, ochre, jade green and royal purple, hot pink and red rose madder. She painted an iris sky, an emerald world, a fuchsia sea, a turquoise moon. Walt was a dreamer too, just like Mary. He dreamed of making a feature-length films painted entirely by hand. Nobody believed it could be done. But Walt believed in magic, and he believed in Mary. So Mary painted the concept art for 3 of Disney's most beloved animated films: Cinderella, Alice in Wonderland, my favorite, and Peter Pan. Then Walt asked her, one of his favorite artists, to create art for a brand new attraction at Disneyland. For Mary, this was the biggest and best project ever. It's a Small World was to feature kids from all over the world to celebrate unity, goodwill, and global peace. For inspiration, all Mary had to do was open her suitcase full of paints to create the colorful, happily ever afters. That's the end, and there's more information here at the end of this book all about her. One of the most important things about Mary is that she was one of the very first women to work for Walt Disney. If you know anything about the history of Disney, there's the 9 old men that helped Walt build his company, but Mary was always around as well. Also, there is a series of shows on Disney Plus, that one of which features Mary Blair in it as well, and has lots of really great information in it. So I hope this inspires you to learn a little bit more about Mary Blair's bright, beautiful world of color. And now we're going to use my green screen to show you some of her original concept art. The art that Brittany Lee used in her book to inspire Brittany Lee's illustrations in that book, but I want to show you the real artwork that Mary Blair used. So the first thing we're going to do is look at this concept drawing for It's a Small World, and you can see that the colors in this one aren't as vibrant and pinky purple and stuff like that as they were in the book, but this was just one of the original concept drawings for It's a Small World. And then next, we're going to look at the concept drawings for the 3 movies that Mary Blair worked on. So this is Alice in Wonderland, and it's obviously, I love Alice in Wonderland. It's one of my favorite ones. It's based off of a book by Lewis Carroll, and that's a concept drawing for that. And next we're going to look at Cinderella. So this is Mary Blair's concept drawings for Cinderella. And you can see that she had a great influence on other projects later that came along later. Her concept for Cinderella looks a lot like what they ended up using with Aurora from Sleeping Beauty and other movies to come, even when she wasn't directly working on them. And then here's her concept art finally for Peter Pan. And you can see this influence in some of the artwork in the ride at Disney World for Peter Pan, and Disneyland as well. And then also there's another thing at Disney World where you can see some of her work at the Contemporary Resort. There is one of her giant murals in the main lobby that looks a lot like It's a Small World. So that's a little bit of information about Mary Blair. Alright, so for our next book, we're going to talk about an artist that you may have heard of before. This book is about Frida Kahlo, and it's called Frida Kahlo and Her Animalitos. and it's by Monica Brown and illustrated by John Para. So you might have heard of her. She's very famous for her unibrow, which is when your eyebrow connects all the way through. This book is a little bit longer than our last book, but it's very cute, and it has a kind of a surprise. This is a story of a little girl named Frida who grew up to be one of the most famous painters of all time. Frida was special. This is also the story of 2 monkeys, a parrot, 3 dogs, 2 turkeys, an eagle, a black cat, and a fawn. They were Frida's pets, and they were special too. Frida had a parrot named Bonito. Like her parrot, Frida was colorful. She liked to wear bold shades that celebrated indigenous Mexico and her own heritage. She lived in a house the color of a parrot's bright blue feather, La Casa Azul, where she grew up with her mom, dad, and sisters. And yes, you guys get to listen to me mess up Spanish again today. Frida had a pet fawn named Granizio. Like her fawn, Frida had watchful, beautiful eyes. When Frida closed her eyes, she remembered her life as a little girl. Frida was always with her father, a photographer who taught her to look at the world through curious eyes. Frida and her father would walk to the park to collect bugs to look under a microscope. Frida's father also taught her how to paint finishing touches on his photographs. Frida loved the small brushes and the beautiful colors. Frida had a cat with black shiny fur, the same color as her long dark hair. Like a cat, Frida was playful, but as a child, Frida couldn't always play. When Frida was sick, she got very sick. She was in bed for a long time, but Frida didn't get sad or bored. Instead, she used her breath to make mist on her window, and then she drew a door with her finger. Frida used her big imagination and curious eyes to walk out the door with a magic friend, a little girl who danced and played like a kitten. Frida was independent like a cat. Frida's sickness left one of her legs different from the other, and children made fun of her. But this didn't stop Frida from skating and riding bikes and rowing on the lakes of Chapultepec Park so that her leg could get stronger. Frida was not afraid to do things like other little girls didn't usually do. She wore overalls and boxed and wrestled. Frida had 2 spider monkeys, Fulong Chang and Camito del Goalaba. Like her monkeys, Frida could be mischievous even when she was a teenager. When Frida was 15, she went to a school called the Preparatoria and found a group of friends she loved. Like Frida, her friends were curious to learn all they could. Together they read and studied and argued and sometimes got in trouble. Wearing matching caps, they rode donkeys through the halls of the Preparatoria and set off firecrackers. Frida had an eagle named Gertrudis. Like her eagle, Frida's imagination could fly high. When Frida was 18, she was in a terrible accident, and once again she had to be in bed for many months. This time, Frida didn't create a magic friend, she created art. Frida's mother made her a special easel and hung a mirror over her canopy bed so that Frida could paint. Frida used her imagination and curious eyes to do just that. Feet, what do I need you for when I have wings to fly? And if those weren't enough pets, Frida had 2 turkeys and 3 dogs. Senior Excocotl, Senorita Capulina, and Senora Costi. Frida's turkeys were intelligent and sensitive, just like herself. And, like Frida, her dogs were warm and loving. When she was lonely or sad, she would wrap her arms around them and they would comfort her. Her Xolo dogs were the same breed that ran and hunted with the Aztecs thousands of years ago, and a reflection of Frida's heritage, of which she was very proud. Frida's dogs had no hair, but their bodies were warm, and Frida gave them great big hugs whenever she felt lonely or sad. Frida's animalitos were spirited and entertaining, just like Frida. When her two spider monkeys were being good, Frida would hold them like babies. When they were being mischievous, they would steal socks and fruit and leap through windows so that no one could catch them. Her parrot named Bonito liked to snuggle under the covers while Frida took naps and would do tricks at the dinner table for pats of butter. Frida's animalitos played all day in the courtyard at La Casa Azul, the bright blue house on Londres Street. Her husband, Diego Rivera, even made the animals a pyramid to climb on so the pets could roam freely. And Diego was also an artist. When Frida painted, her pets would keep her company, and Frida painted all the time. While the birds sang, the dogs barked, and the turkeys danced in the garden. Frida's animals were her children, her friends, and her inspiration. Frida painted when she was sick and hurting, and Frida painted when she was happy. She also painted when Diego was gone and she was sad. But Frida was never really alone at La Casa Azul, the bright blue house on Londres Street. She had her animalitos and herself, and she painted both. Frida painted herself with Fu Longsheng playing with ribbons. She painted herself with Bonita the parrot and Senora Shotl the dog. She painted her black cat too, peeking over her shoulder. Frida painted herself with all of the pets she loved so much, and even the butterflies and caterpillars. Her paintings were magic. And today, if you visit La Casa Azul in Xococan, just outside of Mexico City, you might hear the sound of a bird or see a black cat jump from the pyramid that sits in the courtyard of the bright blue house on Londres Street, where Frida and her animalitos lived so many years ago. It's now a museum. There's a picture of Frida with Fu Longsheng. So there's lots of photos of Frida out there. Frida mainly painted herself. She has a lot of self-portraits, and that's what we're going to look at now. So use my green screen, and I'm going to show you some of Frida's self-portraits that feature her animalitos. So this first one is called The Self-Portrait with Thorn Necklace and Hummingbird from 1940. And you can see that it doesn't just have hummingbirds up at the top. It also has her cat peeking over her shoulder and one of the monkeys. And her famous unibrow. Alright, so next we've got Me and My Parrots from 1941. And you can see this one features her parrots and her unibrow. And then last but not least, we have Self-Portrait with Small Monkey from 1945, which also features her monkeys. So most of Frida's paintings are self-portraits like that. Okay, so that is Frida Kahlo, and I'm going to move on to JeanMichel Basquiat. So, and I'm going to share this book with you. This one's called Radiant Child, and it's a really beautiful book, really beautifully illustrated, that actually won the Caldecott Award medal a couple of years ago, and for its illustrations. So the Caldecott medal is given to typically picture books. Sometimes they're not picture books, but typically picture books that have really great illustrations that help tell the story. So this book is called Radiant Child by Jovanka Steptoe. And it's the story of a young artist, JeanMichel Basquiat. Alright. Somewhere in Brooklyn, between hearts that thump, double Dutch and hopscotch, and salty mouths that slurp sweet tea, a little boy dreams of being a famous artist. In his house, you can tell a serious artist dwells as he sits at the table with pencils scattered everywhere. JeanMichel draws from morning until night with a serious face and a storm of papers. He refuses to sleep until he has created a masterpiece. At night, images enchant JeanMichel's mind, and he wakes from his dreams to add one more line. His drawings are not neat or clean, nor does he color inside the lines. They are sloppy, ugly, and sometimes weird, but somehow still beautiful. His art comes from his mother, Mathilde, a Puerto Rican woman who designs and sews, cooks and cleans, and makes the house look like a stylish magazine. But most important, she lies on the floor and draws with JeanMichel on his father's old work papers. From her, he learns that art is not only in the poetry books she reads to him or in the theaters and museums they visit. Art is the street games of little children in our style and the words that we speak. It is how messy patchwork of the city creates new meaning for ordinary things. While visiting the museum, they look at his favorite works of art. Reading the story behind each artist, reading the story behind each work. This is how JeanMichel learns what it means to be a famous artist. Back at home, he creates art on the floor as his father, Gerard, plays jazz records. Mama Mathilde cooks arroz con pollo and calls JeanMichel mi amor. The energy and life of the city can be felt in each line of his drawings. As time goes by, JeanMichel learns that art has healing power. After a car accident, he's scared and confused. Mathilde gives him a book to calm his fears. It is filled with pictures of bones, skulls, and other body parts. JeanMichel draws from it until he knows it all by heart. He is no longer afraid. Back at home, JeanMichel's body heals, but his heart breaks. His mother's mind is not well, and the family breaks. She no longer lies on the floor and draws with JeanMichel, but sits by the window singing only to birds. JeanMichel is confused and filled with a terrible blues when Mathilde can no longer live at home. He tries drawing the terrible out of his blues, but the things are not the same. As JeanMichel grows older, he visits his mother when he can, always bringing his artwork to show, telling her that one day it will be in a museum, when I am a famous artist. A teenager now, JeanMichel decides, Papa, I will be very, very famous one day. With a sly look, a twinkle in his eye, JeanMichel leaves Brooklyn for New York City, the Lower East Side, a concrete jungle where only the tough survive. During the day, dressed in a green jumpsuit splattered with paint, JeanMichel stays with friends, sleeping on couches and floors, leaving a barrage of collages and poem-filled papers everywhere he goes. At night, JeanMichel spray paints the walls downtown with poems and drawings that catch the eye of artists, gallery goers, and passerby. Under his art, he signs the name Samu. Instead of JeanMichel, everyone wants to know who is Samu. Samu moves from street corners to art gallery walls with powerful color composition and line, collaging and painting on anything he can find. His art is still not neat or clean, and definitely not inside the lines, but somehow still beautiful. With his magical charm, JeanMichel draws a crowd, but when it's time to work, he prefers to be alone, with the radio and TV on full blast. Now, in expensive suits splattered with paint, he flips through stacks of magazines and open books and paints into the night and sometimes for days at a time, while sounds and images jump into his head. JeanMichel, an artist among artists, never doubts one line, creating from a soundtrack that is all his own. People describe him as radiant, wild, a genius child, but in his heart he is king, so he draws crowns for himself and the others he admires. A grown man now, with the art world in his hands, JeanMichel still visits his mother when he can, and is at his most important shows. Above all the critics, fans, and artists he admires, the place of honor is his mother's, a queen on a throne. He is now a famous artist. And then, just like the other books, there's some more information about JeanMichel. He was born on December 22nd, 1960, and grew up in Brooklyn. So, he passed away on August 12th, 1988, when he was only 27 years old. His paintings now sell for millions of dollars and are collected and displayed in museums all over the world, such as the Whitney Museum of American Art and the Brooklyn Museum. All right, so let's look at some of JeanMichel Basquiat's French. Now I'm messing up French. Artwork. Okay, so now let's take a look at some of JeanMichel Basquiat's famous works. This first one is called the Untitled. It's actually untitled. It doesn't have a title. A lot of his works, not a lot, but some of his works went untitled because, as the book told us, he sketched and did so much that not everything ended up with a title. But this one is important. It's a painting of a skull, and it sold in 2017 at a Sotheby's auction where they auction off fine art for $110.5 million, which at that time was the highest amount received for a painting by an American artist at an auction. So $110.5 million for one painting. So that's pretty amazing, and can show you how much his art impacted the world. This one is called In Italian, from 1983, and you can see this one is very evocative of most of his work. You can see the use of his bold color and the influence of that anatomy book that his mom gave him that we read about in the book that we just read. And also the skull painting is also the same kind of thing. You see that influence of anatomy and bones and structure in a lot of his work, all because of that book his mother gave him. And then last but not least, I wanted to show this one just because I know a lot of you will know, but the Riddler. And it's called Riddle Me This, Batman. And this one shows the influence that popular culture had on him. A lot of his work speaks to politics or also just famous people, and I thought this one was kind of an interesting look into that. So, all right, so I hope you guys have enjoyed this unusual story time with some really beautiful, famous picture book artist biographies. And I hope we're all together again in person next year for Arts Fest. But we can celebrate artists all the time by purchasing their works and also just by reading about them. There's so many amazing biographies, short picture book biographies about artists and of course all different types of people out there at the libraries that you guys can enjoy, and I hope you will look them up. So have a great day. Thank you.